Guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ajana. Thank you so much for coming around. If you're new to my channel, you're welcome. Consider subscribing and don't forget to turn on the bell icon so that you get to know anytime I post new videos. And for my returning subscribers, thank you so much for always supporting me. I really appreciate you also. Today I'm going to show us how to cut and sew a layered dress with a ruffle halter neckline. So if you're interested, let's get started. So here is my net. As you can see, I am working with 10 yards of net, and then I have my 1 yard of satin, and of course you also need 1 yard of your cotton lining. So this dress, I want to make it as simple as possible. I will not be adding any hard net, and it's for 18. So I'm going to keep this aside and grab my basic bodice pattern, because we're going to alter that to create the halter neckline. All right, so this is the front of my basic bodice pattern. So I believe you already know how to draft a basic bodice pattern, but in case you don't know how to do that, I am going to drop the link of the video in the description box so you can check that out, so that you know how to draft a fitted basic bodice pattern. So now the first thing I'm going to do is to note the strap that I'm going to be using on this neckline. Alright, so I'll just mark it and then trace it out on another paper and then keep it aside. So as we proceed, you understand better. So now for the strap, I'm going to mark. You can decide how wide or small you want sorry, it's a band, not a strap, it's a band. So you decide how wide or small you want the band to be. So this band is what is going to hold the ruffles on the neckline for both the front and the back side. All right, because you know a halter neckline does not have any shoulder. All right, so now for the band, I will be making my 1 1/4, and you can see I am marking it from the neckline. So I'll just trace it out all round. I'll just keep on marking 1 1/4, 1 1/4 until I get to the shoulder line, and then I will connect. So I'm going to trace this out now on another paper, because we are going to be cutting it out separate. Okay, so when you note this, you can just trace it out on another paper so that you don't make any mistake. All right, so let me just quickly trace it out before we now mark out the halter neckline. All right, here you can see that I've traced that out, and this is the shape that I have. So I'll be using this later on this neckline. You can see that it is exactly the shape that I marked on this pattern paper. So now we're going to be drafting out the halter neckline now. So what I'm going to do is to mark 2 inches from this shoulder line. Now this part depends on how open you want the chest area to be. So if you want it too wide, you can just use 2 1/2. From the shoulder line, you can just mark 2 1/2 inches. That is if you're making this for smaller kids. But for 18, you need to make it smaller so that it will cover up the chest area very well. So for that reason, I'll be using 2 inches from this shoulder line. So I'll go ahead and mark 2 inches now. Okay, so that is the point there. Then I'll take my ruler and connect it straight to this curved area of the armhole. Now you can see, once I get to this point, you can see, just move it, make sure that it's straight, and make sure that it connects to this area, this armhole area. And then I'll just mark it straight. Okay, just like that. And you can see that we have the halter neckline ready. You can see that it's very easy. So I'll repeat the same now for the back pattern. So for the back pattern, we're going to adjust it a bit, especially on this back neckline. So for this back neckline, I use 1/2 inch. You know, this is the basic back neckline. I use 1/2 inch, but because it's a halter neckline, I need to bring the shoulder, the neckline down a bit. Now for the front neckline, I use 3 inches. That is the neck depth. I use 3 inches for the front. So for this back now, I will just make it 2 inches, just 1 inch different. So I'll just mark from the shoulder. Okay, this is 2, and then I'm going to mark it from here as well. Remember I said I use, for this initial one is 1/2 inch. That's why I'm placing my tape this way. So this is where 2 inches is, and then we're going to connect to meet up to the shoulder point there. Okay, so now this is the new back neckline. So now after doing this, now I'll mark the 2 inches again to create the back halter neckline. So this is where 2 inches falls for this back. Okay, and then I'll connect. You can see that I'm repeating the same thing, just that the back neckline now you need to adjust it, so it's almost the same with the front. Okay, so now this is what I have. Now remember that you also need to mark out the 1 1/4 again for the band. Remember that is very important for the back neckline, the band. So for the front I use 1 1/4, which is this. Okay, so we need to create the one for the back as well. So go ahead also and mark that out, trace it on another paper before cutting off the halter neckline. All right, so let me just quickly do this before we continue. So this is it after cutting out the back neckline, that is the band, and this is what I have. You can see that it matches with what I have here. Now we're going to be cutting out now the pattern, and now that we have the band, you know that we're not going to be cutting out on this initial neckline. We're going to be cutting it out now on this other neckline. The only thing now is that we're going to be adding your sewing allowance before you join it on this band. So this is how I'll cut now, and I'll end it on that. Remember that line that I marked, 1 1/4 inch, that is where I'll be ending it. When I'm cutting on my fabric now, I will just add my sewing allowance. So this is the back one, and this is how it's going to be. Okay, so this is how it's going to be. This is how it's going to be. Okay, you can see the shape that I have there. So repeat the same on this front pattern and then cut it out on my satin before we cut out the skirt part. Okay, so we're going to take it one at a time. Alright, moving on now to the skirt part. I'll be using a 180-degree circle to create the layers, and then you can also use a 90-degree depending on how simple you want the dress to be. So for this I'll just use this 180-degree method. So I have my 1 yard of satin here. You can see I just folded it into 2. Okay, and then I'm going to fold it in a triangle way, for same way you fold your fabric when you want to make a 180-degree circle. Now you can see that it's so this is it. Now the first thing to do is to note the length of the skirt that you're working with. So for this one, the length of the skirt is 24 inches, but the satin I will not be making it 24 inches. I'll be making the satin 20 inches, because we'll now use the net to complete the length of the skirt part. So we'll use the net to complete that. For this one I'll be using the length of my satin now to calculate how to how to mark out the layers. Now I'll be using 20 inches length for the satin, but for the net I'll be making it 24 inches. All right, so the first thing to do is to mark out the waist. So I'll be using 3.14, which is the formula for half circle or 180-degree circle pattern. So now I'll use the waist measurement, which is 30. The one I'm working with is 30, so you work with your own measurement. So 30 divided by 3.14 will give me 9.5. So I'm going to mark that out first, and then mark out the length of the skirt that I'm working, which is 20. And then after connecting it, I will now show us how to create the lines, because you'll be needing 3 lines where you'll be sewing the layers. Okay, so let me just take it one at a time. I'll just mark out, like I just explained now, the waist and then the length of the satin. Alright, here you can see I just finished marking out the length of the skirt and then the waist area. So I have 20 inches now, so I'm going to divide that by 3, because this is going to be a 3-layer dress. If you want to make yours 4, 5, 6, you're going to divide by that measurement. So now 20 divided by 3, because I'm making my 3 layers, 20 divided by 3 is 6.6. So now remember that this one on the waistline is the first layer. Then from that waistline I will now mark the 6.6. You can see I've done that already, and then another 6.6, making it the 3-liner. So this is the first layer, second layer, and of course the last layer. So I'm going to mark it straight. Okay, so I'll just mark it straight and then connect. Now for the net, this is how you're going to be cutting this out on your net. So this is very important. Just take your time and digest this area, because this is the main thing that you need to make this layered dress. Now I have the 3 lines already. So for this first layer now, you're going to determine what to cut out on the net. So for this first layer, remember that each of my lines is 6.6, and then the length of the skirt is 20 inches. While I want, sorry, the length of the skirt is 24 inches, but on this my satin is 20 inches. So since I want the length, the actual length to be 24, all I'm going to do now is to measure what I have from this third line. It is 6.6, remember that. Then I'm going to add 4 inches to that to complete the 24 inches length that I want to use. So if I add that 4 inches now, it is 10.6 for this first layer. Then you will need to add your sewing allowance. So I'll just make it 11 inches. So on my net now, I'll be cutting out 11 inches. Okay, and I'm going to cut that out in 3 places, because we want to make this a 3-layered dress. So I'll cut out 11 inches in 3 places, which is going to serve for this first line, second, and the last line. I hope this part is clear. Just take your time. The actual length, let me just repeat it again so you understand better. The actual length is 24 inches while my satin is 20. So for the first layer, you need to add 4 inches to that to complete the actual length I'm working with, which is 24. Okay, so if you add the 4, that is 10.6 plus your sewing allowance. So that is what you're going to be cutting out in 3 places. So I'll just quickly cut this out and then mark out my layers so that it will be, the line, so that it will be visible. That is where I am going to be sewing all the net, and then I'm going to fold my net for easy cutting and then cut out 11 inches each for the line. Then for your net, you can decide to double it or to make it just one layer, depending on the volume you want your dress to have. So I'll just quickly cut and then we continue. So here I have the 3 layers cut out. As you can see, I just folded the 10 yards as it is, and I just folded it in a way that it will be easy for me to cut and then cut out. I have 11 inches like I just explained. So I'll just gather this now and pull it. After pulling it, I will now join each of them on the lines, okay, that we have here. So now moving on to the bodice part now, we are going to be creating the layers for the bodice part. So here is my pattern. This is the front one. So now the first thing to do is to check what you're working with. That is the waist measurement of what you're working with. So for mine, it is 32 inches for the waist. This includes the zipper sewing allowance. So whatever you're working with, you're going to multiply that by 5 and then divide by 36. Now 36 is inches. 36 inches is for a yard. Okay, so we want to use this method to know how many yards that we'll be needing for the bodice parts. Okay, so use the waist measurement, multiply by 5 and then divide by 36. So mine, after dividing, I have 4.4. that is to say I'll be using 4 yards for the ruffles on these bodice parts. Then you're going to be using the length that you have now, all right, to cut out. So I have 4 yards for the width of my net, 4 yards, and then the height now is going to be whatever that you have here on the pattern. Okay, so for instance now I have, if I measure what I have here, it is 13 inches. Okay, I have 13 inches, and remember that on this part we'll also add the ½ inch for the sewing allowance. So what I normally do is, after measuring what you have, just add extra 1 inch to that. At the end of the day, after giving your work a good press, you can always cut out any excess on the dress. So now I have 13, so if I add 1 to that, making it 14 inches. So the height of my net now will be 14 inches, while the width is going to be 4 yards. So here I have 4 yards already. All I need to do now is to cut out, to reduce it to 14 inches. So I'll just fold this very well and then cut out 14 inches, after which we are going to gather the part that is going to be on the waistline. Now this 4 yards, 2 yards is for the front, while the other 2 yards is for the back. So I'll need to cut this into 2 so that we use the one for the front and then gather it and repeat the same for the back 1. So this is where we are so far. As you can see, after sewing the 3 layers, this is what I have. Now you can see this is the first layer, and then this is the second, and then the last layer. So this is the back side. As you can see, I have my 3 lines already. So I'm going to keep this aside so we can complete the bodice part. All right, so for the bodice part now, after using the 4 yards, remember how we calculated that? After using the 4 yards of net for both the front and the back side, you divide that into 2 yards is going to be for the back, and the other 2 yards for the front. Now the one for the front, you can see I've done that already. Here I use the 2 yards, just gather it and then place it on your fabric. So now the only thing I'm going to show you here is how you can curve in or cut out this armhole on the net. So it's very easy. All I did was just to take the, I'm going to use this back one. This is one side of the back, which is 1 yard, and you can see I've gathered that already. So I'm going to use this now to illustrate what I just did on this front one. Okay, so now just take it now and grab the other side of the back, which is this one here, and then I will now place this over it like this. You can see how I am placing it now, and then I will just cut off, following the curve, the armhole curve here. I'll just cut it off so that by the time we finish gathering on this part, your net will not be coming out. So I'll go ahead now and cut, then gather it, then give it a good press. Okay, so this is what I just did. For the front, you're going to be doing the 2 sides. You know, this is the back, this is the center, that is the zipper side. So I will not be doing that for this zipper side. It's only on the armhole area. So let me quickly gather this and then place it on this one. So I will have something that looks like this. This is one side which I've done already. So this is what you're supposed to have after doing that, and then you give it a very good press. So let me just quickly do that, so I will show you how to join the band. So this is the band. Okay, I've cut them already with the lining. All I did here was just to add my 1/4 inch for the sewing allowance. All right, so I'll just take this one at a time. Let me quickly gather this and join it together so we can finish up. All right, this is what the back looks like after joining it together with my satin. So this is what I have. All I need to do now is to give it a very good press so that it will flatten up nicely. So I'm going to show us how to attach the band on the neckline. And before we do that, I would like to remind us that our online classes are on. We have the beginner class, the intermediate, the advanced, the trouser class, the cupcake dress class, and of course the wavy effect pageant dress class. So if you are interested in any of these classes, kindly send me a WhatsApp message on the number that will be dropping in the description box so you can know more about the details of the class or classes, whichever one you're interested in. So now for the band, now you can see I have it. The first thing I did was to join the shoulders together. This one is going to be the lining. So the first thing I did is to join the shoulders together and then notch the midpoint. You can see I have the center point that is on this front side. You need to notch that point and also notch the neckline for this front. Okay, and before attaching this, make sure to close the armhole. This is very important. You need to close it if you want to have a very neat finishing. So now after doing this, now I will use my hemming gum. Okay, so you need your hemming gum now. I'll use it to, you know, place it on this band and also on the lining. We're going to make sure that it will cover it. You can double it to make sure that it will cover all the space. All right, then I am going to note where to leave open. Okay, so now you can see this is the midpoint. This is the midpoint. Now this is where it ends. So from this point to this point on this band, I'm going to leave it open. That is where we're going to put this in and then fold it in nicely. So from here to here will be open, and the same thing goes to this back side as well. Okay, so just note the point. Okay, and then take the back one and also place it to know where you should leave open and where you should not leave open. All right, so now this is the back. You can see, so from here to here now should be open as well. That is to say, I'll only close up from this point to this point. All right, and then this other side is going to be open, but on this neckline, that is the actual neckline, we are going to close it all up. So this part that is open, we are going to use it to turn it inside out. But before all this, make sure to put the hemming gum like I said, so that by the time you fold this in, it's going to be very easy for you. So let me just quickly use the hemming gun now to place on this, and then we finish up the dress. So here it is after joining these sides together. Remember I said that this front and this back side should be open, and then I use my iron just to note how many inch that I want to use to stitch this neckline. So what I'm going to do now is to join it with this one. So the first thing to do is to stitch it with this down one, okay, using that tiny inch that I left here, and then stitch it all the way down to this other end before I will now use this upper one now to close it up. This way you have your work very neat, okay. And there are so many ways of attaching a band to the neckline, but I feel this is the easiest one. Even a beginner can use this method and then get it right. So I will also repeat, take the back one, follow the same process and join it at the back, and then join the sides together, then attach the skirt. If you like, you can also add a band on this waistline. So this is how you go about making this beautiful piece. So that is it for today. Please subscribe if you have not, and I'll see you all in my next